Mark had scheduled the dinner as a family gathering, just one more Saturday evening among many. But no one else at the table realized this would be the night every illusion I had about family would burn quietly into ash. They sat around the table as if they belonged together, wine glasses clinking, candlelight dancing over polished silverware. The table had been curated more than prepared imported Italian wine-seared duck breast with truffle glaze monogram napkins. A performance of class, of success, of unity. But I knew better. Ethan, my son-in-law, was holding court as usual. His voice coated the room with varnished self-importance. We're increasing Brighton's endowment next quarter. I got 3 trustees to commit on the spot. Rachel and I even matched part of it personally. He sipped his Barolo slowly like a victor. Rachel, seated beside him, nodded more from habit than conviction. She still wore that nervous smile she had in college, the one she used when a professor asked something she didn't quite understand but didn't want to challenge. Clara was absent. Already asleep, they'd said. It wasn't hard to imagine Ethan deciding that family dinners were above a 6-year-old's pay grade, or perhaps he just didn't see value in her, watching me exist quietly on the margins. I said little. I smiled when appropriate. I poured wine, complimented the risotto. My watch, an old Garmin that Ethan had once mocked, glinted faintly beneath my cuff. He had no idea it had been recording since the moment I stepped in. It wasn't anger that drove me to it. It was something colder, something earned. Ethan's monologue shifted gears seamlessly. What we're really building at Brighton is a generational structure. It's about legacy, leaving behind things that matter, not just nostalgia, actual systems that endure. Then with surgical precision, how does it feel, Mark, seeing your legacy become obsolete? There was no gasp. Rachel's lips parted slightly, then she offered a neutral chuckle, barely there, like static in an old radio. I didn't respond immediately. I looked at Ethan, not with fury, not even with sadness. Just presence. He hated that most of all people he couldn't provoke. I've recorded that I said simply with a nod toward my watch. That silenced the table longer than anything else had. Rachel blinked. Ethan gave a forced grin. I kept eating. When dessert arrived, I excused myself. No long speech, just the sound of a chair scraping gently against the hardwood. I took my coat from the rack, faded camel wool stitched back in New Haven, when I had less gray in my hair and more illusions in my eyes. At the doorway, I turned, not dramatically, just enough for my voice to carry. This will be the last time I pretend this is still a family. I didn't wait for their reactions. In the taxi back to my apartment, I watched the streetlights smear against the windows like bruises. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel broken either. I felt aware. I pulled out my phone, created a new folder. Case 01, Ethan. For the first time in years, I smiled not out of joy, but out of clarity. 3 days after the dinner, I received the official letter. Ethan wanted control of the assets I'd built over a lifetime, wrapped in something grotesquely titled Voluntary Legacy Transfer Agreement. The envelope came in thick ivory paper, no return address. But the logo embossed in the upper corner belonged to the law firm Ethan had used for years, slick white-collar sharks who believed legacy meant tax optimization. I unfolded the document with gloved care, as if touching it directly might contaminate my skin. 80%. That was the figure. Hidden under clauses of intergenerational efficiency, fiduciary consolidation, and a particularly arrogant phrase, streamlining legacy under trusted stewardship. Ethan, he had finally stopped pretending. 5 years ago, I told Rachel a man shouldn't just love someone, he should understand who that person trusts. She had waved me off with the ease of a daughter sure her father was just being difficult. She didn't know what I saw in Ethan's eyes. Now the cost of that blindness had arrived in an envelope. That afternoon, Ethan showed up in a gray blazer and a silk tie with Windsor knots too tight. Behind him stood a man named Williams, early 40s, neutral expression, but his eyes didn't follow Ethan the way a paid loyalist should. Mark, Ethan said with a smile that belonged more in a boardroom than a family room, this is a simple matter of ensuring your legacy continues effectively. We're just putting formal structure to what the family already understands. He laid the documents out like blueprints. The trust will be in your name, of course, but I'll manage it. Disbursements, investments, tax shelters, It all runs smoother that way. I let him talk. I nodded at appropriate intervals. Williams glanced at me twice, once when Ethan mentioned streamlining authority, and again when I opened a drawer and slowly removed my glasses. I'll need time to review, I said. Ethan looked surprised. He didn't expect resistance this early. Of course, but we'd like to finalize by next week. Rachel and I already spoke to the auditors. I raised one hand not as a dismissal, but as punctuation. That wasn't a request. Williams gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. That night I unlatched the steel case at the back of my closet. Inside, flash drives, ledgers, asset maps. Nothing flamboyant, just decades of structured autonomy. Real estate portfolios, silent shares in 2 private equity firms, overseas patents filed under initials. Not even Ethan knew my middle name. I began converting the tangible to digital liquidated minor holdings, redistributed dividends to shielded wallets, divided ownership of my stock portfolio across 4 shell entities. Nothing illegal, just invisible. By 2 a.m., the old system was gone. The new one was built, quiet, clean. I sat back and stared at the flicker of the monitor. There was no sense of revenge. This wasn't personal, it was structural. At 2:13 a.m., I typed a message to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. To Diana Kessler, subject message. It's time, she would understand. A week passed before I heard the reaction. Ethan's voice through the walls echoing from Rachel's phone. What the hell do you mean the accounts are frozen? Rachel fumbling, confused. She'd expected a yes, not a lockout. Later that evening, an email pinged my inbox. A copy automatically forwarded from the bank. Modification by legal owner Mark Hale. Timestamp or 2:13 a.m. April 4. I didn't respond. There was no need to. Rachel called at 11:03 p.m. Not because Ethan's accounts had been frozen, not because the house of cards was falling, but because of her mother, because of a voice I had buried for 15 years. I opened it, she said quietly. There was no need to ask what. I had given her the envelope the night she got married. When you truly doubt yourself, I had told her then open it. She hadn't asked what was inside. She just tucked it away the way daughters do when they trust a father's strange rituals. And now it had resurfaced. I met her at the lobby of my apartment building. She stood with her coat still on, eyes rimmed with a kind of tired that no sleep could cure. I didn't ask questions. I just opened the door. She walked in, sat down at the edge of the couch. Didn't even take her shoes off. I think I believed him, she began. I said nothing. She continued, voice low but clear. Ethan's been talking about putting Claire into some kind of generational planning vehicle. He says it'll secure her future, but he wants her name on the family trust. I watched her twist her ring, her mother's ring, the one Ethan had once joked about replacing with something more contemporary. Rachel looked up. He said it would make her an asset. I closed my eyes briefly, not out of pain, just to slow the blood behind them. She reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope. The seal had been broken. Inside, a letter yellowed with time, folded in thirds. She handed it to me, not to read, but to confirm what she already knew. My wife's handwriting. Soft, cursive, careful loops. She had written it in the hospital 2 months before the end. I remembered every line. If you're reading this, I'm probably not there to say it out loud. And if you're doubting yourself, it's because someone around you has made you question what's real. Ethan is charming. Too charming. I've seen how he pulls you into his rhythm, makes you feel small, then lifts you back up, just enough to confuse love with control. If I'm wrong, forgive me. But if I'm right, don't let him do to you what I've seen him try to do with me. Rachel sat still, her eyes unfocused. I didn't know she saw it too, she whispered. I took the letter and placed it gently on the table. She saw more than we gave her credit for. I should have read this sooner. No, you read it when you were ready. Silence stretched between us, not awkward, but heavy. Honest. Then I said, you don't have to choose sides, Rachel. But if you decide to look in one direction, make sure it doesn't cost you everything else. She nodded once, then stood. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't need to. On the way out, she placed the letter back on the table this time, with something written in her own hand beneath it. For the first time, I choose not to look away. After she left, I walked to the safe behind the study wall. It had been untouched for years, or so I thought. I ran the access log on the AI integrated lock. A line of red appeared: unauthorized entry attempt logged at 3:41 a.m. the night before. Video footage blurry but clear enough to identify a tall male figure. Not Ethan, but someone working for him. I didn't panic. I logged into the back-end security system and enabled cloud mirroring. From that moment forward, every camera in the house would upload footage to encrypted servers in real time. No one would erase anything again. This war had left the realm of money. Now it was about memory, about truth, about trust lost and reclaimed piece by piece. The court summons arrived on a Tuesday morning. Plaintiffs Ethan and Rachel Hale claimed deliberate asset reallocation to evade family obligations. I held the envelope a moment longer than necessary, not out of surprise but recognition. The battlefield had shifted. Now it had a name, a docket number, and an agenda. I texted Diana, "It's time." She replied within 2 minutes. "Office at 1 p.m. Bring everything." The last time I saw her, she stood over my wife's hospice bed, pressing her palm gently to hers and promising me, "If it ever turns, I'll be here." Today she kept that promise. Diana's office was a fortress of logic, clean lines, no wasted gestures, everything labeled and lethal. She greeted me with a nod, not warmth. That's how I preferred it. "You're not surprised," she said, holding up the court documents. "No." "Good. Let's proceed." She handed me a thin black folder, 3 pages only, but its weight was enormous. "Preliminary forensic tracking," she said. "Over the past 18 months, Ethan has siphoned over $200,000 from accounts listed under the Family Well-Being Discretionary Fund." I raised an eyebrow. "That fund hasn't been active since your wife's final year," Diana finished. "He reactivated it under a new EIN identical name. Different legal structure. All funds were rerouted into a holding company under the alias Silver Haven Advisory." My knuckles stiffened around the folder, but I didn't react outwardly. "Where's Rachel in all this?" I asked. "She signed off on the filings, but she's not listed as a beneficiary. Legally, that's odd. No presence, no protection, just a name on a line." We continued. Diana walked me through the response we would file, counterclaiming not only to preserve my estate, but to initiate a full financial fraud review against Ethan. There would be no press release, no rage, just a clean incision. Then the footage. I slid the drive across her desk. "Last Saturday, my safe. Someone was inside." Diana plugged it in. On-screen, grainy night vision footage. A tall man entering with an override key card, gloves systematic. "Not Ethan," I said, "but someone on his payroll." She nodded. "This supports criminal trespass. Surveillance privacy violation. We'll add it to the brief." We drafted the warning letter next. No threats, just precision. "You initiated this case. We will ensure it is brought to completion with full legal transparency." I signed at the bottom. Diana sealed the envelope with an old-fashioned wax stamp. By the time we arrived at the preliminary hearing, the courthouse buzzed with the tension of money dressed as principal. Ethan stood at the front, flanked by his counsel, an overly polished young man with a permanent smirk. Rachel wasn't there. Her absence said more than words. Inside, we presented no defense yet. That was by design. Diana motioned for a recess, and then when granted, her window stood with a thin folder in hand. "This court should be aware," she began, "that one of the plaintiffs, Mr. Ethan Hale, has omitted material financial declarations." She walked to the bench. "Supplementary exhibit. A concealed investment accounts under the alias Carson Vale Holdings." Ethan turned. His lawyer fumbled for his tablet. "Further, we have evidence suggesting Mr. Hale has been transferring assets through accounts unlisted in the joint marital portfolio. This violates fiduciary transparency." The judge leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" Diana clicked the remote. A monitor flickered on, showing transaction logs, timestamps, routing paths. Ethan stood. His hand reached for his phone. "Mr. Hale," the judge said sharply, "remain seated. You may not use personal devices during proceedings." Ethan's face, always composed, always rehearsed, cracked. Just slightly, but I saw it. Diana turned to him, offering a rare smile. "This is just the beginning." Rachel appeared at my door just after 9 p.m. holding a file folder thick enough to threaten someone's peace of mind. Stamped across the top, premarital assets Ethan Hale in red ink. She didn't say hello, didn't ask to come in, just stepped over the threshold, placed the folder on my dining table, and sat down. I poured 2 cups of black coffee, no sugar. She took a sip, stared straight ahead. I went back to the guest house, she said, the old one behind our place in Brighton. That's where I found this. I opened the folder. Inside, scanned documents, transfer receipts, shell company listings. A USB drive taped to the back of one page. You remember when I said I was done being blind, she asked. I nodded. I should have added, I'm also done being used. The air between us felt like held breath. No accusations, just residue. She spoke slowly. The man who broke into your house last week, it wasn't Ethan directly. It was Carl, our old housekeeper. Ethan paid him off 2 years ago to handle things discreetly. I never asked what that meant. I just let it be. A pause. And this, she tapped the file, was hidden in the back of his gym bag. I found it while sorting laundry. He's never done his own laundry, Mark. Never. I connected the USB to my laptop. Encrypted but amateurly. Within minutes, rows of transactions unfurled. 6 years. Offshore movements. Digital wallets. A long list of funds relocated before and after their wedding date. Diana joined via secure video call. Is that what I think it is, she asked. Rachel held the folder up to the camera. Diana scanned the paperwork with her eyes like a surgeon identifying cancerous tissue. This proves he used premarital assets illegally commingled with Rachel's postmarital income to fund separate investment ventures without disclosing them in court filings. In short, I said fraud. Diana nodded. This shifts the whole center of gravity. Rachel folded her arms. He used my name, my trust, my mother's memory. Clara's college fund is in one of those accounts, and he still dared to frame you as the threat. I looked at her, seeing not a daughter this time, but a woman clawing her way out of manufactured narratives. She wiped the corner of her eye. Her voice cracked, not from emotion, but restraint finally thinning. I'm not sorry for marrying the wrong man. I just want to know. Can you forgive my silence? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to my study and returned with a single envelope. Inside, transfer documents for a 35% stake in my Cambridge property. Already notarized. Her name alone on the deed. I placed it gently on the table. The first time you told the truth, I said I believed you. This just confirms it. Rachel didn't cry. She just closed her eyes and nodded once. By midnight, Diana had formalized our new strategy. The documents Rachel provided would be used not just to block Ethan's asset claims, but to pursue charges of marital fraud and financial deceit. I granted Diana full legal authority to submit everything sealed, time-stamped, irrefutable. Before we ended the call, she asked me, "And Ethan?" I smiled without warmth. "He'll find out soon enough." Later that night, I sent an anonymous email. Subject: inheritance and fire to ethan.haleyprotonmail.com. Message: when you play with fire, you forget it runs in my blood. I wore my old navy blue suit, the one with the frayed hem and a stain near the cuff from Clara's first birthday. In my breast pocket, a fountain pen my wife had given me on our 10th anniversary. I didn't wear it for sentiment. I wore it because today wasn't about war. It was about closure. Courtroom 3 was solemn. Rows of polished wood, muffled whispers, the smell of paper and pride. Ethan sat 2 tables away, whispering fiercely to his attorney. Rachel sat apart, eyes forward. Her jaw didn't move, but her hands gripped the edge of her seat like she was hanging off a cliff. Diana stood first. She walked to the center with quiet force and laid everything down literally. A box of documentation, camera logs, printed transfers, notarized declarations, and a small USB. She walked the judge through a decade of deception. Premarital assets disguised as joint ventures. Shell accounts, silent withdrawals under the label of elder care. Surveillance footage showing forced entry. Digital fingerprints. A symphony of facts, no inflection, no embellishment. Then it was Ethan's turn. He stood dramatically, said I was paranoid, claimed Rachel had been emotionally manipulated, that she was always too impressionable and couldn't see past her grief after Mom. He smiled like a martyr, nodded toward the judge, and closed with, "All I ever wanted was to protect the family." Rachel stood. "I'd like to speak," she said. Silence. The judge allowed it. She turned. Not to Ethan. To me. I let him twist things. Against my father. Against myself. I believed what I needed to believe because it was easier than admitting I married a man who fed on control. But the truth doesn't change because we ignore it. And the truth is, Ethan manipulated all of us. No tears, no anger. Just the kind of clarity that stings more than any outburst. The judge turned to me next. "Mr. Hale, do you wish to make a statement?" I stood. My voice didn't rise. "I'm not reclaiming honor," I said. "I'm just putting it back where it belongs." Then I sat down. The judge leaned forward. "This court finds substantial and compelling evidence that Ethan Hale misrepresented financial interests, violated marital fiduciary duty, and attempted to fraudulently acquire assets belonging solely to Mark Hale." She paused. "Full restitution of said assets is granted. Further proceedings on tax fraud and financial misconduct are recommended for review. Rachel Hale is granted protective status under the Family Trust Act. The motion for legal separation is acknowledged and accepted." Ethan exhaled audibly, chest falling like a collapsed tent. He looked at Rachel. She didn't look back. The room emptied like a tide pulling out. Outside, the wind was stiff. A local journalist held out a recorder. "Mr. Hale," she asked, "do you have a comment on today's victory?" I looked at the gray sky, thought of Clara's laugh, thought of my wife's pen in my coat. "I didn't win," I said. "I survived. And that's already more than they expected. They thought I'd crumble quietly, that age makes you weak or grief makes you blind. But silence is a weapon when wielded with patience. Justice didn't roar in my story. It walked in calmly, dressed in evidence and truth. And when it finally sat down beside me, it felt like reclaiming a name they'd tried to erase. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to stand long enough for the noise to die down and the truth to echo. And if I've learned anything, it's this: the cost of dignity is steep, but the cost of surrender is everything.